But I'm still talking to my best friend from high school, and we're both 89, and we're
But you remember good memories.
we have
vividly.
good memories. Well, we have kind of we have fun too on discussing what old age does to you. And I was telling her a few things. One of the funny things that happened with Stan, he always liked a notepad, and he'd get comfortable in his chair, and he'd make lists of everything. Mostly what to take on a canoe trip, and if you're going to mud
Exactly.
or something like that. But he also had funny flights of fancy. And after he died, Choke, my youngest son, came up here and helped me throw out a bunch of stuff and clean up, and which needed being done. Because Stan would start these lists, and they were all over the house. And Choke found one, and he said, "Hey, Mom, look at this." And it was a list of about 15 people. And the note was to me that when he passed, he wanted me to give these people $10,000 each. 15 people, they wanted to give them $10,000 each. I didn't have $10,000 to my name.
Let alone $10,000, yes.
Well, and so my favorite friend Helen said that she lives in Florida now, and she said that she has one eye that's not too good, but she has a good eye. And she got up in the morning and put on her glasses, and she said, "My good eye was gone. I just couldn't hardly see anything. I could hardly make my way to the kitchen." Well, she panicked and called the optometrist. She doesn't drive, of course, and got her grandson to take her. They were sitting in the waiting room, and the grandson got real close to her and looking this way, and she said, "What are you staring at?" And he said, "Grandma, you don't have a lens in that." I just watched this. 89's full of fun.
Well, let me ask you to pique your memory, and now you lived in town for off and on, especially with the bad.
To begin with, we lived at Kenai Corners all the time.
Right. Okay.
And we didn't start homesteading until '59, so the kids and I stayed out here to prove up.
Right.
But Stan would either drive back and forth or whatever, and then after we got the patent, then we split our time because the kids were in school.
Right.
And whatever, so we mostly spent summers out
And
there.
and Kenai Corners was where Protosos is now?
One of those buildings
Yes.
in the back are one that we built, yeah.
Okay. And I think they moved the building to Red James's by the old Kenai Corners, the 2-story. I remember that being moved to Red James's lot there.
You
on
know,
the-
I think I remember that. I'd forgotten all about that.
I remember seeing, because we lived down Beaver Loop, and I remember seeing him that had this big house. I was amazed.
Well, I guess. I had forgotten that. But that big, if you look down the alley, there's a big steel,
Warehouse.
well, yeah, warehouse over there. And we built that. And I know Nick Sakaloff and another one of the Sakaloffs helped with the roof on the thing. And they were afraid of nothing. One of the guys that worked for us had to come in. He said, "I can't watch. I can't watch." But nobody got hurt.
So, I was talking to Lance, and in Ballad of Kenai, there's some characters.
Yep.
They're composite characters, and of course, my parents came up here in the '40s, and then got married and went back down. To introduce,
When did they get married? I didn't know.
they got married in Soldovia in 40. I want to say 8. And I'd been
No
right in there.
kidding. Was Gene teaching or something?
No, Dad had just gotten, he was on Iwo Jima.
I knew he'd been in the service.
Yes, and he had seen combat, of course, on Iwo. And then on the way back, on their way to Saipan, the battle is over, things had settled down, they were all gonna put the troops back on take them to the next battle, and the truck he was in, had an accident and rolled, and he broke his wrist. And they put him, he was 18 months in the hospital with that broken wrist.
Oh my goodness.
And so after he got out of the hospital, he came to Alaska like so many vets.
A lot of vets.
Yeah.
I've read that proportionately we have more vets than any other state.
I think people like to be alone after that.
They may need some quiet, yeah. How did your mom get to Salt Lake?
Well, Mom had just graduated from high school and was going to travel around the world with her girlfriend. And actually they met in Anchorage at some cafeteria, and I think it was Fort Rich's cafeteria, and I guess the rest is history. Then they went back down to Seldovia, got married, headed south, and then had all of us kids down there and came back in '59.
59, I couldn't remember. I've known your folks a long time, but
Right.
I couldn't remember.
And then he came back as a teacher. So he did start.
I knew them both, I liked them both, but I really miss your mom. She was a character and she was fun.
Well, and I remember she did the first play in the new high school. Remember the new high school in '67 when they built KCHS?
I do.
And we had senior plays. All the senior classes had to do a senior class play back then. And she directed the first one.
Is that right? You may not remember, but in the first New American School, it's the one that's the Boys and Girls Club
Yes.
now. There used to be a program in Alaska called Alaska Music Trails, and every year or two, it would make a whole circuit, and they had named people. I mean, this was good music, which our kids didn't really have a chance to see. And one time we drove clear to Seward in one of the churches in the basement. Richard Dyer Bennett, he's a folk singer, and some well-known recruit, I think we still have a record of his. And we drove clear to Seward on a cold night in an old Jeep just to hear him and meet him, and drove back. And that series kept on for
I remember, I don't remember the name, but I remember some of the concerts.
remember
Because
some?
we always went, live entertainment was so rare, everybody kind of went.
Yeah, and Terry remembers, and she's your age,
Yes.
so she remembers those. And we had some really good performers. They were professionals. I mean, they weren't just some hometown band we got together or anything, you know. I was sorry to see that go, and I don't know what happened. Statehood, funding, I have no idea.
Well, and that's part of what I was hoping you might be able to remember. You know, the Performing Arts Society. I'm not sure when they came into being, but they have 4 or 5 concerts of professionals come in, and they sponsor quite a few professional shows, like the old days. And I do remember the Army or Navy, no, it must have been Army band would come down. I don't know if that was part of those concert series, or if it was just they were touring the bases and we got to hear them.
What was the name of it?
The Army or
Army
Air
band.
Force bands would come
Wow,
down.
that would have been a treat. I don't remember. I would have gone to that. Wow.
Okay, maybe I'm saying, and this is what. So part of my problem is I have memory of it, but I can't. I was 3. We were little kids,
Right.
and so by the time I actually was aware, it was late '60s, early '70s that I started being able to go. That's the year we did this play. This was who was in it. That's part of what I'm hoping to capture. But you were saying the Sakaloff brothers were helping with the. Do you remember who the real name of Half a Box and Poopy Doop?
I know Poopadoop. I got my thinking. His name was Bill DeAngelis.
I'll be darned. I'll
Well,
be darned.
in
Okay,
that-
I have a picture of him
Well,
in the
When
in the
he
60
jogged?
yeah, in the 64 earthquake in Anchorage.
it was a special issue, I think, of Life magazine.
Yes.
And then I could read a little of the text in the picture of it that somebody showed me. I don't know. His name was Bill DeAngelis, and and he was a fixture around Kenai. We had a lot of old guys that were fixtures around Kenai, and I swear I don't know what they did. I don't know what Bill DeAngelis did. He walked the streets, and he was a common sight where he lived, how he lived.
And he was Poopadoop or half a box?
No, this is Poopadoop.
Poop.
And his name was Bill DeAngelis. Bill in either I or E, and then DeAngelis. But the interesting thing that hit Kenai, truth or non-truth, I don't know, was that when that magazine came out, oh shoot, it had a worldwide
Yes. Yes.
following because that earthquake was a humongous earthquake. I mean, it was an earthquake above all earthquakes. And what we heard was that a wealthy widow from Europe had seen those pictures and was so moved, and here she turned over and there's this poor old man and his dog, and she sent for him. So last we heard, Poopadoop was in Europe. Now whether that was true or not, I have
don't care. I love that story.
I have no idea.
That's great. I love it.
And I don't know about half a box. I kind of remember him, but he lived out behind where Bill Wells is.
Spinar Building.
Back in there, I never saw where he lived. It was kind of a hovel. But Cleon Wells showed me, she was one of our good friends, that that's what he lived in, with a half a box.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So at that time, and the Wellses used to babysit us, we lived in Anchor Trailer Park while our house was being built.
Oh, did you?
And so I was 3 or 4, maybe 5, and though we weren't allowed to visit with those guys, Half a Box and Poopadoop. But I do remember they'd go into the back of the woods behind the Wellses, and they were nice, but they kind of smelled a little bit. And sometimes they were
it's
into
kind of
their...
like the homeless in Anchorage, I guess, that are out in the woods, and they had a little makeshift, yeah.
So it was, but some of the character, one of the characters, particularly in Ballad, is sort of based off of Poopadoop. So that's
Well,
interesting.
we had a lot of, as I say, a lot of old men that ended up here, and we were always on the road. There was one who he was nearly always drunk, I think, and zoned out. But he always looked kind of scary to me, but he was a common fixture on the old part of town. But he reminded me, there used to be a program that had a character named Lurch. What program was that?
Addams Family.
The Adams Family, yeah, that was one of my kids' favorites. I always wanted to call him Lurch. I don't know who he was. But that's how he walked down the street. Just
sort of.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know who he was.
What do you remember about Joe's?
About what?
Joe's Bar, Kenai Joe's.
Very little. I've never been in it.
Was it a sort of a gathering place, or was it just a party place?
Well, no, I think in the early years, it's Joe Council, and he had a loft or something upstairs because some of the people, years and years, maybe even before we had a highway into Kenai, I don't know, it's kind of a roadhouse. a place where people could sleep.
That was my impression as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, usually guys. But then it kind of deteriorated. And he had a son or two that had to go to Seward to the sanitarium because they had TB. Tuberculosis was very common, especially among the native kids.
Yes.
I think those years must have been hard on women too, because I know a lot of widowers that were taking care of their kids. There was Vic Segura. He lived down on the road right overlooking the bluff. And his wife had passed away, and I'm sure she was a native girl. But he had come up on one of the fishing boats every year, and then one year he just decided to stay. And the fishing industry was the big thing in Kenai then. We didn't have a bank, and so they used the cannery, mostly Libby, McNeil and Libby, but they used that for a bank. If they needed some money, they would get in touch with Libby in Seattle, and had they been sellers of their fish to them, or had they worked in the cannery year after year after year, and the cannery knew them, they could borrow money from them. As I say, we had no bank here, and they didn't really have any credit. They didn't have anything. It was just a lot of old buildings in Kenai that weren't worth very much. But the canneries played a big, big, major role in that. But anyway, Vic Segura had started out as a Filipino, and I assume married a native girl. She was gone by the time I got here, and he had quite a few kids.
Now, was he a Filipino?
I don't know, but I take it she was a native.
I just saw his great granddaughter yesterday.
Who?
Jessica Segura.
What's her name?
Jessica?
What's her last name?
Doth now. She married Jake Doth, but it was Segura, maiden name Segura.
My grandson Tanner married a girl who is Tirsa Segura. And she was raised, I think, mostly by Jim, who's her grandfather. I think her parents were not a good influence, and most of what she did was take care of the younger little kids. And so after a while, she, however, got out to Jim Segura. So when they come home, Tanner and Tirsa come home, she always wants to go out and stay a few days with her grandfather. She's an absolutely beautiful girl. She's got a little boy named Torin, who is about this big, the fairest skin, the bluest eyes, hair who was so blonde, but he's 1/8 native, and as such, can take advantage of any of the native things they have around here, like
good for
him.
him.
But he's the last person in the world you would think
look at
would
and say
any
have any ethnic,
native blood in him. But we had several old men, and in the winter, none of the businesses were very busy, and so they would get in the habit of old Mr. Segura, Vic Segura, and there was a grocery store run by Mr. Castleberry, who was an attorney outside, and he and his wife ran this grocery store, a little one, across from Ogden Cooley's, and Cooley's lived down where the old post office used to be, where Zary's church was, down in there.
Yes.
Yeah. And my mind's going, what was I talking about?
Well, we were talking about the Seguras, and I was asking about Joe's, and that it was a roadhouse. And then we were talking about the canneries, which is interesting.
Yeah, because, as I say, the town depended on them, and they even brought up loads of groceries. They bought a lot of groceries from them. And in the winter, even the grocery stores weren't all that busy, and so some of these older guys would make the rounds every day. They didn't work. As soon as the kids went to school or whatever, they would make the rounds, and they always stopped to visit with Stan or Stan's dad in the later years. And they stopped. There was a little building right next across the alley from us, and Frank Rowley had his business office there. And he would stop in, they would stop in there. They had their stops all around town. That would be their thing.
Just come visit and
If you
have a
remember
cup of
right,
coffee and
we didn't have Homer Electric, and Frank Rowley had a big, big generator,
yes.
noisier than heck. Frank used to say, I don't hear noise, I hear silence, because that makes the generators off. But anyway, he had this little office there, and he had one of the first chest deep freezes I had ever seen. It was a top opening, one of those chest ones that you had to dig clear down to find what you wanted. But one winter, he brought a jigsaw puzzle. It must have been this big, almost about the size of that table. I swear it was blue sky over blue water. Never have I seen anything so intimidating. But it got to be where the people would come in and work on it every day. They'd put maybe one piece in.
By the end of winter?
And yeah, all winter long. I don't think they ever did get together, but they got a lot of it together. It was a monstrous thing. But as I say, at that time, HEA was not here. It was Frank Rowley, Kenai Electric, and HEA finally came up the highway from Homer, and they made a deal with Kenai that they wouldn't infiltrate their characters. So they went clear around Kenai and came out to Nikiski. Nikiski had electricity before that kind of HEA, before Kenai did. And then after so long, I don't know, they finally...
Well, interestingly, you know Will.
Yes, I know
of course.
Will.
And, you know, that was about, if you remember, I was a pretty short guy, little kid. And Will was very tall very early.
Yeah.
So Will and I got to be good buddies in 6th grade. And in 7th grade, you know, the old man had Will work. I mean, there was no plane, it was only work. And so he got into the scrap metal business. And Will was so tall, he could drive an 18-wheeler.
Oh my gosh.
And a forklift. And I could rig. So we would come into scrap yard or boneyards, and we'd load up this flatbed 18-wheeler with all the scrap. And I don't know how or all the details, but old man Jarek said, you boys go over to that shack over there. And it was the generator. It was the old generator.
Wow.
And Will and I grabbed it and scrapped it. I assume he had made a deal with...
Wow.
But you never know with the old man. He may have just decided, well, it's been sitting there and nobody claimed it. It's hard to say. But we went in there, and it was right by the wild Fish and Wildlife. Those right by Bookies. Those down
Fish and
towards...
Wildlife used to be right downtown.
Right.
They had housing.
Those white buildings, those government buildings right there.
And
And the generator plant, as I remember, was almost right across the street from that.
Yep.
Okay. And that was the one we went and got and scrapped it
for
out.
crying out loud.
It was big. But we were,
Well, you know,
12 or 13 when we did it.
after Fern died, we had Roy out. We were staying in Thompson Park in the winter those years. And we had Roy out to dinner one time, and Grandma had an organ. And all of a sudden, Roy said, well, let's see what this is like. He hitched up his pants and went over and sat down at the organ and started to play. Amazing.
Yep.
They used to be in the carnivals, in the
Yes.
show business.
Yes, yes.
And I think I know who Will is.
Well, he's certainly a brilliant. Will is a marvelous musician. He'll never claim it, but he certainly is.
Well, I'll tell you something is, he is darn good looking, and he looks very much like a well-known movie star. And,
Well, you know he was adopted, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
I do know that.
but
That's why I'm saying, I don't know when he was adopted or who his real parents were, but he sure looks like a, well, I used to say Tom Selleck, but I don't remember anymore.
no, that's pretty good right there.
Yeah,
Yeah, big handsome man.
yeah.
So that power plant did run things. One of the historic, that there's two historic pieces that I'm wanting to explore because I don't know well, and one of them is we had the fishing industry. I know that, and then of course World War II brought the military bases, and that really got roads and some civilization.
The building of Wildwood. That's one reason Stan moved to Kenai. He'd been in Alaska and always wanted to go. He had the Kenai picked out when he was a kid, but it was a fortuitous thing that Wildwood started building, and so he thought that that would, and it did. It brought people and brought a little bit of money into town.
What year was that? Do you remember that?
I don't remember what
Because I'm
year
trying to
Wildwood-
remember, was it oil first or was, it must have been military first, then
No,
oil.
Wildwood was
Sure,
first.
okay.
Yeah.
And then once they had that road, they were looking around maybe.
They took that road, the North Road was cleared just past Edie's.
Right.
And I understand Edie had a lot of good points, and I know it pretty well. But I also know, the only time I was ever in her place, I think, was when they had a kid murdered out
Oh.
there. Oh, and she used to keep, according to the gossip, she kept a lot of GIs that came in there, like on a Saturday night. She kept them drunk in the basement until she got all their money, and then they could then they could come to.
I've heard rumors like that.
The night that, well, Stan was not a cop, he was a U.S. commissioner, but there would be times when we had no marshal, we had no trooper, several times, and so people would come to him because he was the only person with any kind of a tie into the court system or whatever, and we got a call one night that there'd been a murder out at Edie's, last frontier. And we went out there, and it was the beginning of moose season. And it got so rambunctious, it was full of moose hunters from Anchorage, for one thing. It got so rambunctious that they were shooting out the jukebox from across the room with a bow and arrow, making their selections. But,
Okay, that alcohol and weapons, probably not a good combination.
I had to pick up my big old manual typewriter and go out with Stan and take statements. We had to, and Eric had to stay with Tucker. He was a baby, and it took a long time. It really was a sad case. It was the innocent bystander that got shot, but he was in for a weekend in what was town because he was stationed at a little place. It used to be ACS, I don't know what it was, right out of town, and he worked out there, and so he had come in to eat dinner out and stay all night, and she did have some nice rooms at one time, and but anyway, I'll tell you some other things we did not have. A lot of the early women, as Cleon Wells said, we would have gone to homemakers on cracked glass if we had to, because that was the only thing that was in town in those years in terms of where ladies could go and
Socialize and...
yeah, and socialize and everything. And it was very important. We had a nurse station here, and that was important, and she always went to homemaker. I'm sorry.
No, no.
Oh, I was going to tell you
Love the details.
about the fact that I've told Debbie this. We used to have a lot of feral cats in Kenai when we first came here. And of course we had a lumber yard, so that they would find places to make a little bit of a nest or
Yes.
something. But we also had a winter, and I'm not going to tell you who it was because, well, as I told Debbie, I'm going to be careful with names because some of these old timers still have maybe kids or grandkids living here.
Of course, of course.
I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
Right.
But anyway, one of the stores started selling and sold a lot of rabbits that were dressed. And after a few months,
Oh, no.
somebody realized that, where's he getting all these rabbits? Nobody raises rabbits around here. And somebody else noticed, and there are no more feral cats around here. So
Okay
anyway.
then, yep. Cat problem solved.
And of course, we seldom had any fresh fruits or vegetables.
Right, I remember that.
And when they did, the word would get around. Women would tell each other, hey, they've got a whole basket of tangerines in a certain store, something like that. We had well, we did have TV later on. But that wasn't really old Kenai, but it was after a while we got going. And they had it just for kids, and it only served, or I mean just for the GIs, and it only served a small area, Kenai, I think. But Terry and Tucker both got sick one winter, and so we got a TV set for them. They started broadcasting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they started with kids shows, knowing that the kids would be home.
I was on that.
Were you on that? Well,
Yes, I was.
they had little contests for the local kids sometimes.
Yes.
Maybe you won one, I don't know.
No, I just
Sure.
remember being on it, and it was at Wildwood, and it was their own local station.
Yes, it was.
And we got to be on TV, and we thought that was pretty.
thought that was
That
wonderful.
was the bee's knees right there.
Tucker won a first prize by naming the rabbit around Easter time. And he named the rabbit the Kenai Carrot Cruncher, which won him first prize. So we drove out to pick up his first prize. And it was 500 pieces of bubble gum. But anyway, yeah, it provided the kids. And the other thing about that station, they used absolutely no commercials. So when there would be a station break, it was always some little anecdote about the military, about the history of the country, about patriotic things. So the first time my kids were ever stateside, all they wanted to watch were commercials. They'd never seen any
Right,
before.
exactly. Because the commercials were as entertaining as the.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Anyway, it was a different world, and I'm sorry your mom's not here to tell you about it, because she was a good storyteller.
Mom was a good storyteller, but her memory for the kinds of details, she would tell you who said what, but not when or necessarily where it was. But she would remember the conversations very sharply, and the circumstances.
How long has she been gone?
Mom died 2 years ago, about almost 2 years now.
2 years? And where was she?
Well, she was in Arizona. My brother Paul lives in Tucson with his wife, and she was raised there. And so.
Your mom was raised there?
No, my
I was going to
brother's.
say, that's not what she told
No,
me.
no, my brother's wife was raised
Oh,
there, so
okay.
they're there taking care of her parents, and Mom had been living in Illinois, and Karen and George were taking care of Mom, and Mom was happy with that, but she fell and broke her hip, and my sister got sick, and my brother-in-law was taking care of Mom, but he couldn't take care of both. So we brought her up here to live with Chris, but Mom was very upset about that. It just really became agitated, and of course by this time she was fairly, we didn't realize how far into her Alzheimer's she was until George couldn't take care of her anymore. See, he was covering all the symptoms, so we didn't realize. Because when I talked to her, she would sound all, you know, how Mom sounded, oh, hi, you know, her perky, happy, never down self, and then, you know, but she would repeat or ask me the same question, so there was little hints, but not as much as when she had fallen, and then George couldn't take care of her, and she came up here, and she went downhill quickly. And then she decided she wanted to go live with Paul, and so we did that. And so she was...
So where did she die, in Arizona?
Yes. Yes, and then we brought ashes up here, and just... In fact, we had the memorial almost a year ago. It took us that long for the family to be able to get together. And
oh, I wish I had gone to it. It's probably a private one, but
no, we had a senior center, and you know, just all family and friends, and it was a good celebration and good memories. She was 90. No, she was. 89 or 90.
She told me one time about her initiation into Illinois, back to your dad's. Funny, my gosh, I never rode one before. She was so...
She could tell a story. She could tell a story. Well, and that...
Well, I grew up in that very area.
Right, and that whole Midwest, it's a different sensibilities than, especially today. But do you remember, because Terry and I, we've been doing theater, we grew up doing theater together. She was in Jean's dance class.
Terry, you know Terry hated Alaska, and she told me that going out to Jean's once a week just pretty nearly made her childhood. She said all she remembers is cold weather and snow and mud, and then she got in there and they had their little fluffy tutus and things on them. She said it was a saving grace for me. Oh, she's got so much.
Well, I'm looking forward. I want to interview her too. But do you remember the years and like when that started, or when Jean?
Terry started dancing when she was 3, I think, and she was born in 56.
It was 56, 57. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But I think she was only 3 when she started.
So was that the beginning of Jean's studio? That would be about
as far as I know,
59, 60 would be when it started?
As far as I know, it was when I first knew Jean. She was married to a guy named Bill Mulvaney.
Right, I forgot about that. Okay.
And they had a boy, Kim, and I don't know whatever happened to him.
Kim died last year of cancer.
Really?
Yes.
Well, in my memory, he's a little kid with long hair. One of the first long-haired...
Well, you know, he struggled with alcoholism.
No, I didn't, but I'm not surprised because I think Bill had problems.
Yes, and he was sober 20 or 30 years and became a counselor. And really helped a lot of people.
Well, how about that?
But Peterson, I think Lance is older than Kim.
Who is?
Lance Peterson. Kim's Lance.
Oh, yes. Well, he's a lot older than Kim. And
okay.
he didn't belong to Bill Mulvaney. He had a different father.
Peterson.
Pardon?
Peterson, right?
I don't know. I suppose so.
Because I think Jean was married 3 or 4 times, which... Well, she was from Chicago. It's not quite the Midwest. And she was a showgirl, so...
She was a what?
A showgirl.
A showgirl?
In Las Vegas, I think. And
well,
she
when
was
I first knew him, we had a, I don't know, it was some kind of a civic meeting. It was the old schoolhouse, I think. It was down where that art center is now.
Yes.
And she introduced Bill to me as being a plumber.
Oh, a plumber. Okay.
Yeah, that was his profession. But, yeah, and then Jean brought her mother up to live with him.
Lillian, yes.
Mm-hmm.
By that time, I believe, she had her house studio towards Wildwood. And Carl had that Quonset hut. Well, I don't know if Carl moved it in by then.
I forgot about Carl, that's right.
So that's kind of when I started being aware. But when I started dancing with Jean, I think it was 5th grade, and the studio was her front room.
Oh, yes.
And there was the wood stove and a 7-foot ceiling. It was very small.
Yes, I know. I've sat in that kitchen many times, which is also small, waiting for an hour, and everybody else would come in, and in the kitchen, there was nothing in the front room except the dance place.
Exactly.
And so everybody took off their coats and their hats and their boots, and I found a chair somewhere, and I would sit there for an hour in the steaming room with all the kids' stuff around, waiting for Terry. And she said, "Oh, Mom, I'm so glad you did. That was my saving grace for the last year was Jean."
You know, that there's a group of, it's a pretty big group. There's this internet thing called Facebook. I don't know if you're familiar with Facebook. It's a social place people can get together.
I'm on it 4 hours a day.
Okay, so there's
And I'm
one
sure
growing
I'll do
up
that.
on the Kenai, and Glenn Toriainen and Mike Hummocky and Mike Hundorf, and I think one other person is taking on getting the stories from the homesteader kids instead of from the old timers, you know. So there's a couple of stories people had shared about Jean and what it meant to them back, especially early when we didn't have TV, we didn't have electronic devices, and we didn't have machine, parlor games and skiing and chores. That's what you did.
I remember one time, Stan and I, it was winter and it was dark, and we were walking clear, you could go clear down to the bluffs then, and they had a path down there, and
Yes.
we owned an old, kind of a boat building down there on the slough for a long time until it got washed away. And we went past a little house in the corner, and there were 3 or 4 people sitting there, and there was Lloyd Porter playing his violin for him. And I thought, my goodness, here in the middle of nowhere, it was a violinist.
Well, now he and Bertha started the first cab company. Is that accurate?
I don't know whether it was the first one or not, but it could well have been. And Bertha was a terrible driver. And they lived in a little town, a little house east of Kenai. They had lived in the upstairs of that old schoolhouse, and Stan and George Dennison and 2 or 3 others belonged to some kind of a civic group, and they were in charge of that building, and they told these guys to go over and inspect it and see if it was safe. Well, of course it wasn't safe. It must have been 100 years old, and they lived upstairs, and the floor had had oil spilled on it. It had an oil thing, and they had something like 8 kids, I don't know. And so they had to tell them that they had to move. And Moira was very understanding about it. I don't know whether they moved to right then, but anyway, yes, Bertha drove a cab, and they lived just east of town after that. And some guy was following her into town. We only had a few cars a day come in. And he came in, and he was still shaky because he'd nearly had a wreck with Bertha. And he said, "Do you know that woman?" He didn't. But he followed her to her house, and he knocked on the door. And he said, lady, you just almost hit me.